Hello, hey, and welcome to my tent, a place to hear life experiences, different opinions, a range of journeys, and a viewpoint different than our own. A place to challenge our own thoughts, a space to learn a little bit, and I promise some fun along the way. I believe we're better when we let a range of people into our tents, so welcome to mine. Did you know that our health is encompassed by way more than just food and fitness? Did you know I'm a health coach? What is a health coach? I can tell you. I work with individuals and groups to look at all aspects of life that help make us truly well. I have structured programs to help you create realistic, challenging but achievable, and long-term transformations that span long past our time working together. I help you take a multifaceted approach to your health, ranging from food, fitness, relationships, work-life balance, financial health, gratitude and joy, creativity, career, and more. If you are looking to make a health transformation, visit my website in the show notes or email me, sarah@sarahjohnstonwellness.com. Cheers to good health. Hello.
Hello. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Me too. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you in person on the internet without being on the internet.
Yeah, even though like the interwebs technically is still involved.
It's still involved. It's wild. I'll like see somebody, especially through making the movie, I'll like meet up with someone who I haven't seen in actual decades.
Right.
But like, because we talk all the time online, I'm like, hey, yeah, it's you. And they're like, we haven't seen each other. I'm like, oh, but I see you all the time. Like I see you all the
weird.
time, but
It's weird. Yeah. I know people who I've been connected with through Instagram for like 5 years. I've never met them.
Right. It's wild. It's wild. I love
It's great, but
internet friends have always been great. It's like always the best.
I know. And we grew up in that weird era where we sort of had it growing up and like AIM and chat room.
Yeah, exactly. But then I don't know. I feel like, especially with like Tumblr era and stuff, and like
what was it?
And
what was that blog website?
Not MySpace. Xanga.
Yes.
If we ever uncover my Xanga, that's going to be some stellar reading.
Honestly, I don't even know if I would want to know.
I've already talked enough about my closet itself in therapy. We don't have to go back.
Yeah, I feel like that was before we had actual therapists to load on.
Oh yeah.
This was before I think my parents were kind of ahead of the game. Like pro therapy when I was young.
That's a game changer.
Right.
That's a game changer, honestly. Because especially for kids or just being like, I don't know, just closing all my windows. Sorry. I have so many, just finished a freelance project. So all my windows are open. Yes. But yeah, it very much like the attitude of, oh, if you go to therapy, it means there's something wrong with us. And you're like, no. I think it's been the best part about growing up because all my siblings and I, we love therapy and it's been great for our relationship because it helps you get out of those cycles of, reverting back to being 12 and full of, hormones and feelings and rage at your siblings, which it's still hard. But it's so great because even with our parents, we're like, hey, let's see this from their perspective. It's been really helpful for them too.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I feel like it's always so funny too when I interview someone that I know, and I almost forget to introduce you. Everyone, we have the wonderful Claire Ayoub in the house today. I have actually known you
since we were probably 10? 11?
Yep.
Is that wild?
I can't do that math, but Claire and I grew up in the same town, went to the same schools, and have now reconnected. And I've just been fascinated with all of the cool things that Claire is doing, writing, producing, directing, copywriting, all of the things, and you've released films. And then is Gyno Kid like a show? Like, how would you define that?
Yeah, so it's a solo show I did after shooting my movie Empire Waste, and I was in post-production on Empire Waste, which is a movie about teens learning to love their bodies through fashion design.
I love.
And it's been like a 5-year journey. It's coming out this fall, which is very exciting. We're going to be in theaters across the country, so I hope we're in Arizona. Stay tuned. And I'm so psyched. But Gyno Kid was my first time back on stage in about 9 years. So I had been working in film and creating like video because I started in live theater. And you remember like high school, I was like big into theater and oh my God, it was like, we were just the batch of weirdos. It was the greatest. And just like figuring out, like I directed for the first time when I was 14. And so Gyno Kid, after living with my parents for the first 3 years I made my movie, my parents are gynecologists and nurse midwife. And I wanted to write a love letter to the two of them for like being my rocks. And also my dad was getting ready to retire.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it was like a huge shift. And like, we all just looked out for each other. And I've always loved hearing about the way they spoke with their patients and spoke about reproductive health and about that knowledge is power. And so Gyno Kid basically came out of that. So I actually pitched the show about growing up as the child of small town gynecologists, which is just as awkward as it sounds.
Yeah.
And I pitched it to the Frigid Fringe Festival in New York. Before writing it, I realized I didn't actually have to submit a script, and I was in the middle of editing. And I was like, okay, I'll pitch and we'll see what happens. And and I was like, I'll write it before they announce. I did not. I was editing and I did not. And so I am like watching this announcement on like Halloween of like 2022 or something. And I'm like holding my dog, who I just found out is going to need like $1,000 of worth of surgery.
Of course.
I was going to need surgery for like a health issue I had, like due to stress. It's so cute. And I find out that I got into this festival and I went, oh my God, I have to write a show.
You're like,
it was wild. I like called my dad. I like told them that day. There was only one other person who knew about it, which was my producer, Lizzie Bryce, she was my production supervisor on Empire Waste. She's an amazing comedy writer, horror writer, and director. And I told her I needed to add someone else's name. And she's like, I keep getting alerts. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I haven't written it yet. And so it's just wild. So it was really me looking it in the face and confronting my fear about doing things with really just me, because I wanted to direct it and I wanted to perform and I wanted to do this love letter to my parents in a way that was like very stripped down back to like my roots of being like, I can do this. And especially in terms of body image, even after doing this huge movie about, you know, teens learning to love themselves exactly as they are and people learning to love themselves, my body dysmorphia before going on that stage was horrifying. It just really, and I'm so glad I did it, because if I'd listened to my brain and listened to my insecurity, I never would have stepped foot on that stage. It never would have gone on to resonate with people. It ended up winning Best Solo Show at the Fringe. It was incredible. And most importantly, like I ended up really finding my passion of combining comedy with health education, especially for reproductive health. And why I love what you're doing too is just, it's demystifying the process and taking the shame out of it and going, let's talk about our bodies. Let's talk about different conditions. Let's talk about, fertility. Let's talk about menopause. Let's talk about, what it looks like. Because there's such a lack of research and there's such a lack of open communication and public health information that really reaches anyone with ovaries. And it's really right? Our bodies.
Yeah.
And it's wild. So
yeah, we've talked about that. I know, with just like the absolute, I think I've said this to you before too. And it's interesting. We'll kind of go into a lot more of this too. It's like, I feel like we learned how to not get pregnant. And then I went to go try and was like, I'm not, how do I do this? And it's very confusing. And if we could go a little bit back, because you said that you directed for the first time at 14, which is like what, a freshman in high school? Like
I was a freshman. I co-wrote a script a one act play with my best friend, who's still my best friend. I actually put her in my movie. She plays a judge. And
Amazing.
we co-wrote this play together that got into our spring drama festival. And this is why I always talk about the power of arts education funding, and we had a really passionate teacher, Jim Luongo, who like, he was the English teacher, and he like created this out of his own like blood, sweat, tears, to get students the opportunity beyond musicals, beyond, that kind of stuff, to get to perform and write or just direct existing one act plays. And it was really special. So Angela and I got paid $50 because we won third place, which, fun fact, was the last time I got paid until I was 33 years old for any kind of art. Our industry's broken. And so, yes.
Yeah.
But so we ended up, I always joke that it like was the core of why I'm more of a humble director. Like I really like, my thing is like, check your ego at the door, because nothing good is created when people are afraid, or when, they're stomping around like, look at me, I'm important. Because I was directing as a freshman a bunch of seniors, and you like can't look cool when you're like, all right, good job everyone, I have to go, my mom's here to pick me up, right? Like you
don't even have a license.
No. And so it's like one of those things where I really learned how to say yes to trying creative stuff, even when I was afraid. And most importantly, I focus on my actors, and I focus on connecting with them. And that's still something I do to this day, and why I love mentoring people, especially younger artists, but honestly, anyone at any age, because when we learn and try things, right, by doing the thing, you learn to get better at it. And if you try to do it quickly, you're never going to do it. Like if I try to
you can't do something 100 times unless you've done it.
Unless you start, right? It's ditto with a first draft. Like a first draft of anything as a writer, it sucks. It sucks. I've heard it referred to as draft zero. I've heard it referred to as like a diarrhea draft. I've heard it, like all of us have our own way of coping with how hard it is to have the idea in your head that feels so clear, and then start writing it and realizing that you're like, I know nothing. I don't know what I'm doing, or this is so bad. And like pushing through anyway, and realizing that in order to edit something, you have to have a draft. Like you can't edit nothing, regardless of what our perfectionist brains tell us. So it's wild. But that for me was so key. And then I did stage management in high school, as well as directing, and I acted in like senior year in plays with like my best friends. It was so fun. And like, it just, for me, those skills in theater were so key, not just with the arts, but like how to run stuff, how to organize, how to be a leader, a manager, like, and not be a jerk about it. I also developed a major caffeine habit to function, which I'm not proud of.
Fair, they like had coffee at school, didn't they?
They had coffee, but also I'd like go to Starbucks and like
that one Starbucks that we had,
like the one Starbucks in the corner, of town, and I would like go there, and I would just, because we'd finish school at 2, and then we'd have rehearsal at 3 and run to like 8 p.m. And I still had to do like homework and stuff. So I'd be like, I'm running on caffeine and feelings. And they were very strong feelings. And
that's crazy.
I loved it. I loved it. And
think about how much energy. Well,
my God.
Caffeine. But I'm like,
no wonder we all like slept through college. Like it just, we're all so tired. We're kids. Like, I'm like, leave them alone. Don't give them homework, or let them start school at 10.
My
like
6-year-old niece has homework, and I'm like, what could you?
Wild.
The whole thing. But growing up, did you always have interest in theater? Like, was that always something that kind of you thought about and liked and did, or did this come out of something else? Like, was it a lifelong thing?
I was like a voracious reader from like from like when I'm the youngest of 3. And so the big family joke is like, no one knew I could read, because no one was paying attention, because I was the youngest. And like, as long as I wasn't like bleeding out of my head, right? You get it.
Yeah. You're like,
and I love my parents. Don't get me wrong, but they had like 3 kids under the age of 4. And I'm like, good God. So my mom, like when she got to my kindergarten meeting, they were like, so we're ready to move Claire to chapter books. And they were like, she can read. Like, it's like the family lore. But I loved reading, and I always loved stories. I loved Shel Silverstein poems and like the musicality of that, like for me. And I have really funny parents. And so like storytelling was always really important. And I was also really lucky. We lived so close to New York, and my parents really prioritized like bringing us into the city to go see shows. And like, and this is why I will scream to the rooftops about affordable theater accessibility, because
Yep.
seeing like Lion King and like seeing, you know, the creativity that went into that kind of storytelling, it always just lit up my brain. And I love that. And so figuring out how to do that ourselves, like getting exposed to like the arts at an early age and going from something on the page to like seeing it full fledged, whether it was like on a stage or like, you know, at like our old tennis club, like we would put on stuff for the summer, like under a tree with like one light, you know, it just, you can create stuff anywhere. And so that for me was so huge. And then when it came to writing, I always loved writing. I always loved writing stories. And so for me, I always joke that I lasted as an actor for about 2 weeks. I was like, I can't handle this typecasting. When I was like 23, 24, I got like a manager. So I was a performer in sketch and improv comedy in New York. Yeah. And they kept putting me up for auditions and they were like, fat, like quirky fat friend, like oversexed, hot, fat neighbor, not hot, fat neighbor. It was like, just like fat neighbor. Like the funny thing is she's fat. Like, and so, but I it was wild. It's wild. And so I like legit would go, I went straight back to writing. Cause for me, and this is something I talk about all the time, right? Like we write what we want to see on screen. Like that's the challenge I give to other writers, other actors, I'm like, write the role or partner with someone to write the role you want to have that you don't see for yourself or you're not getting cast. So that's something for me, like the idea, the power of having an idea in your head from like when I was a kid to being like, oh man, what if I wrote this as something and brought other people into it? What if it didn't just live in my head? And I struggled a lot with perfectionism, a lot with anxiety. I was like closeted all the way through like my mid-20s. And so, you know, just really channeling all my energy into being just creating stuff and like being a good teammate and being, you know, I always loved working with groups of people. Like as much as I love writing, there's nothing like, you know, a live table read or partnering with performers or crew who like bring that to life.
Yeah.
And that's been since I was a kid. And so, yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if I was like, I'm going to be a movie. I'm going to be a filmmaker. Yeah. I think I was just like, I'd love to be a writer.
Yeah.
Definitely.
A creative.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to be a rockette. So, you know.
I love that for you. And
then I'm like, I'm 5'4".
Hey, write the role you want to see, baby. You got you can have 5'4" dancers. Oh my God.
I was a dancer. I was dancing for a long time and then I cheered and I did all of the things and
awesome. Oh my God. It takes the most strength. Oh my God.
Yeah. And then I always, you know, talk too much in class and hence here I am at the microphone like,
same.
Look what I did.
That was before I got diagnosed with ADHD. I kept getting put in a corner. I'm like, that makes it worse.
Like, I just what I did.
My body's not there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy world we live in. But yeah, I always kind of find, especially with creativity, people like tend to really have that spark and that passion, like, and they know it. It's like something inside your soul. And I'm so glad that you did have access. And yeah, so for people that don't know, we grew up maybe an hour outside Manhattan.
Yeah,
so we could go in on the train, head right in there, and it was wonderful to have access because we would do a lot of like the dance. Broadway. So like the Fosse's and the 42nd Street.
Oh, yeah.
Parents would come in and take me to those. And it was really, really incredible. And the arts, I feel like, are so important, especially for people to find a home. Like a lot of times it's where people find their people, their homes, like where they feel safe, where they feel they can challenge themselves, like you said, to like get that confidence to try something and to do it.
And also like, talking about dance, right? You get out of your head and into your body. Like, especially as a kid and even as an adult, like I just got back into dance. Like I go to this thing called Dance Church and it's like a body positive, like queer positive, like welcoming space where it's basically a rave. But no one's drunk. It's you just like dance and like for 75 minutes, hour to 75 minutes, you just 2 rules are like no talking. You can like sing, scream, whatever, no talking. And then you can't stop dancing. Unless like you're in water or something. And it's so liberating just to get out of that fear. And like, are people looking at me and realizing no one cares? And even if they do care, who cares? I'm moving, right? I'm moving my body. And so, yeah, that especially I feel like as younger people, when we're like, full of hormones and feelings and worried about how we're supposed to be, having something to like throw yourself into, like the arts or even sports, right? Where you're like, I'm just focused on this game. I'm just focused on supporting my team members. I like volunteering. I'm just focused on doing something for other people.
Yeah.
I feel like that is so powerful.
Direction.
Yeah,
It's a way to like move forward and
absolutely.
like with goals and with something in mind, whether it's
Those skills.
dance, whether that's dance, that was more of an individual, I would do like group routine or whatever.
Yeah.
But if it's a sport, it's team. If it's
Right.
arts, and then what I love about the arts too is there's a lot of different ways that you can go. I laughed. You're like, I made it as an actor for 2 weeks. Like, but there are so many different things within that world
Absolutely.
that
Honestly,
you can do.
I
Which I
put
love.
on the Gyno Kid in our hometown at the New Canaan Powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it as like a fundraiser we had 3 shows as a fundraiser for they're building a new space. It's going to be awesome. But I love talking at the end about the arts and how it's not just for kids to go into, being actors or writers or directors. It's also like, hey, like I figured out at like 16, I was like running props. So like how to buy stuff, how to organize, how to keep people from like running off with things because they didn't think, right? And so like stuff like problem solving and figuring out and like also taking care of yourself as a person, which, as a queen of burnout, like I was like always burnt out by the end of everything. So like figuring out that like, oh, I don't like feeling exhausted. Like how can I handle deadlines better? How can I learn, to lean on other people instead of think I have to do everything myself? How can I communicate earlier if something's not working? Right. And so like those skills are so key. And even for me, like I run my production company, right? Yeah. So learning those skills at a young age and being like, oh, guess what? I just have to write down all the elements and like organize a strategy for achieving stuff. Or if I don't know, I can find someone who does, or use the good old internet, right?
I think people are scared to say like, I don't know, but we're not supposed to know everything, nor can we. Like, this is such a big thing about this podcast is like, I don't know pretty much jack about the world you live in, which is why I want you to come and talk about it, because like, I think it's okay. Even in our professions, like people will come to me and I'll be like, you know what? I don't know, but let me find out. I'll get back to you. Or I don't know, ask.
And that's just emotional intelligence though.
Yeah.
And I think that's why for me, a lot of in my work as an individual, like I always have like a post-it that says like permission to create, like permission to try. And when it comes to people who I bring onto my team, the onboarding process is always like, I want you to feel comfortable raising your hand if you don't understand something or something isn't working, instead of keeping it to yourself and pretending everything's cool until it's very much not. Because that's also who I am as someone with anxiety for a long time. And now I've learned to be like, hello, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I need to move this deadline. Like I have a great production partner and like I'm very honest about my mental health because I struggle with depression and anxiety. So my 100% will look different depending on the day, week, month, after a long project, like, when my energy is more depleted. So like looking at that it's okay to move deadlines and it's okay to say, I need to call in somebody to help here.
Yeah. Reinforcements. We're not meant to be
my God, we're not
alone. Like we're not meant to do things alone. No. And I think that's been a testament to all the things you have been able to create. So can we talk about Empire Waste? Because
you bet.
I am so excited and it is just the coolest project. So if you want to give a little bit of a background on Empire Waste and what the premise is and what that process looked like for you to create this. Because this is like I was like, Claire is making movies, like full on movies. This is crazy.
Thank you. And can I just say, like, this has been a 5-year process and the friends and family and just folks I've met while making it and reconnected with, especially from our school. People reached out who are now parents or have also struggled with body image. Like that for me is the freaking coolest because it's just been a really cool reconnection with folks and just connecting in general. So Empire Waste is a heartfelt comedy about teens learning to love their bodies through fashion design. It's like a movie I wish I had as a kid. And it follows a teenager named Lenore Miller, who is plus size, really insecure about her body and really keeps to herself at school. But the thing that she hides from everyone except her parents is that she loves fashion. And so all day at school, she's keeping her head down. She's drawing dress and clothing illustrations. Then at home, she makes them, but she never wears them. And so she wears what her soon to be friend calls her grief tracksuit, which is just all black. And so she ends up being paired with a girl at school, named Kayla, who is like fat and fabulous and so confident, but doesn't have the clothes she wants to wear, right? She loves bold color. She loves patterns. She's not afraid to stand out. And so when they're paired for this project, Kayla discovers the clothes in Lenore's closet and begs her to make her one dress. And it just becomes this friendship love story about really learning to, again, just like you were saying, right? Not be alone and to feel comfortable reaching out to other people. Lenore starts designing clothes, not just for Kayla, but other girls at school who don't feel comfortable in their own bodies or don't have the access to the clothes, right? So we have one character who's like super short, who always has to wear kids' clothes. One character who's like super tall and like moves through the world like a drunk baby giraffe. She's very clumsy, so she needs clothes that are long but also durable, right? And then we also have one character, Marcy, who is disabled. She's an ambulatory wheelchair user, and oh my God, she is without a doubt the strongest person in that entire friend group. Like she's a leader. And so a lot of the film, what was really important was not just about bodies, but how different body types and backgrounds are perceived, and being able to flip them on their head. So like for my two leads, what was really important to me was casting, was making sure that my leads were, one of them was size 18 plus, the other was a size 24 plus, because we wanted to show a range of body types, not just the plus size, big, heavy air quotes we see in Hollywood, which is usually, I call a Disney plus, which is a size 8 with a round face.
Like, which is
not a plus size person.
No.
Great person, but not a plus size person. And so just showcasing bodies together that if I had seen on screen as a kid, I would have had a totally different relationship with my body. And that's the feedback we keep getting from the screenings. And I got emotional on set. We were filming a scene between the two best friends, and they're like sitting on the bed and like talking and making space for each other. And I teared up behind the camera because I was like, oh my God, if I had seen this. And just what the feedback I got from someone who worked on the project with us is just like, you stop seeing them for their bodies and just see them as people.
Which is the end.
That's the goal, right? It's the most powerful part, because when we judge people at first, right, of being like, you're lazy, you're sloppy, or whatever, especially or if you're disabled, you're weak, you need to be infantilized, all these different things. And looking at that and saying, are you sure? Are you judging people for how they look, or are they acting in a way that sets that apart? Or how do we minimize ourselves into how people perceive us? So that's a big storyline with Lenore and her mom in the movie, played by Missy Pyle, and her dad's played by Rainn Wilson. The two of them are just the greatest, and really just had my back so hard. And the mother-daughter relationship is really key. And for me is one of the reasons I did 17 live readings across the country, because I wanted to test out the script, but also make sure this mom who's trying to convince her daughter to lose weight, to be taken seriously in the fashion industry, because she's concerned, doesn't come across as a two-dimensional heinous bitch. Because early drafts, like there's a teacher played by Jolene Purdy named Miss Hall, and she is like, the girl's like a cheerleader at school. Like she's so like big. She's basically me. I'm basically the Miss Hall, and the dad is me. They're me. And at the end of my first live reading, I think, or second live reading, I was like, so any feedback? And I love getting feedback. And I always give my audience permission to give feedback, because, you meet your audience ahead of time. And I was like, any feedback, like, please be honest. I can hear what works. I won't know unless you don't tell me. And I won't know unless you tell me. And someone said, okay, here's my pitch. I think that the mom should die on the way to the fashion show, and the dad and the teacher should get together. And I was like, oh, I have so much work to do. Right. So looking at that mother-daughter, I know.
Like, you're like,
I was like, wow, what a twist. That's not going to happen. But right. It's this really tough generational trauma
Yes.
relationship that, the mother learned from her mother. We learned in the movie. The line is like, she was told people judge your body before they judge your body of work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something she internalized, and that she loves her daughter so much and is so afraid of her being hurt. But when that love is wrapped in fear, it becomes something dangerous, right? It becomes something that hurts. And so that was a big part of the movie. And I always have to say, my mom came with me to screen in Annapolis Film Festival. And same thing when she came to like the second live reading, I like looked up and she was like watching through her hands. And I always say, she's not my mom. My mom is not Rachel. She's my inner critic. She is what would happen if my self-loathing and fear about my body crystallized into, a 40, 50-year-old adult.
Right. Parented you into believing that. And we are from the generation growing up. I mean, listen, if
Y2K was not friendly to bodies of any kind.
If me, as a person who has always been skinny and traditionally aesthetically pleasing, didn't get away without an eating disorder.
Right. And this is the thing. And
like,
shame thrives in silence too. And one of the reasons why I'm very protective of younger people, but also excited that more people are talking about different bodies, even though I feel like we've totally slid back since the pandemic, but being able to see different bodies and people representing themselves like on your small screen, on your phone, like whether it's TikTok or Instagram, like for us, I know it's like Instagram, like with like F your beauty standards and all these different spaces and, going from body positivity to more like body neutrality and understanding these terms. I feel bad for our parents, because if we had a heinous time, because we did, they were raised with the dieting generation, the like commodification of dieting, of like, you need to lose that weight. And, talking about menopause, talking about your body changing, there's just this now targeting of people our parents' age about getting them to lose weight and lose that belly they get with menopause. And you're like, you mean their body changing? Like, especially,
age in general.
Bounce back from big baby weight, right? As right? Talking about that, you're like, how dare you? Right? Or people
it's just not I will never be the same.
No.
First off, my bones morphed.
Your body made a person. And that's the thing. The human body is incredible. But the standards set for women in particular is unreachable. And I say this all the time. If the diet industry worked, it would have put itself out of business. Right?
Ooh, I love
it would have put itself out of business. It is made to gaslight people into unhealthy cycles, right? And then it ends up hurting us more than it helps us. And so you have people developing, osteoporosis, developing all these different issues because they weren't eating enough, or were starving themselves repeatedly, or, weren't lifting weights because they were afraid it would make them bulky. Like all these
that's my favorite thing if lifting a weight made you bulky, we would all be the Hulk by doing laundry.
Right? And like looking at that though, but of being like, be small, be small, be small.
Yeah. Well, I think it translates also into be small, be quiet.
This is
when we come out of that, and I think the work that you're doing also in this space, because I think when people come and see this film, it's incredible the messages that they're getting. But I also think it shows young people that it's possible to be a woman and a director and it is possible to also create and do these things and accomplish these things. And you took this story that was in your brain and made it into something. And so this act of creating not only gives them this beautiful film to watch to find the message in, but also this like inspiration of like, whoa, all these people did this really cool thing.
Honestly, one of the reasons why I love talking to students. So we were able to screen, and I traveled there. Like they flew me out. I went to Annapolis, Maryland. We screened for like 200, 300 high school students for their education day. And my two leads flew in from college in Minnesota and in Austin, Texas, to just come talk to students. And the coolest thing was, for the first 10 minutes, like a bunch of students were like talking during the movie or like not wanting to focus because they just clearly had no idea what they were there for. And they were like forced to go see a movie, and it was like full of fat people in the beginning, and people were like making jokes and like whatever.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes in, they locked in. Like, and it was so cool. And I give that major credit, especially for our cast, of being incredible and real people, as well as the 250 people on our team that made that movie, that like every step and touch is specific, every color, everything, but especially our cast and the way I wanted to direct it was making it feel real. Like we were seeing real kids, not like 30-year-olds playing 16-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
They were like 19. We found them. And that's why making the movie was really important for me to take care of my cast and crew, because this is really triggering material. Like it's a comedy, but one of the reasons I wanted to make this was to make sure the story remained intact and wasn't sanitized just to be like, and now she loves herself forever.
Every day of every.
That's how it works. It's not. Self-confidence is not a switch you flip on and off, right? It's a journey. It's like a true journey. And I talk about this with our cast and crew all the time. And just being kind to ourselves and getting to the root of that shame we feel and developing tools to talk about our bodies and learn. And so we were able to screen in Annapolis, and then we screened for 200 high schoolers in Dallas. And one of the coolest things about this project that I'm the most excited about, in addition to the movie, is we got $250,000 in funding from Procter and Gamble and Venus brand specifically to make a free education curriculum that's coming up alongside the film. Because what happened, because I was meeting our audience all the way through the making of this, and because when I wrote this when I was 26, I basically pulled all the trauma out of me and gave it to my managers and was like, please give me money. And they were like, oh my God, we love it. Female empowerment is so in right now. And I was like, now? And then they're like, but there's too many women in this movie. I was like, what? And they're like, and not enough men. And I can't imagine the teacher, Miss Hall, being a woman. She's way too funny. What if she was a man? And I was like, and they're like, when can we get the next draft? I was like, in a month. And I promptly, Sarah, quit comedy, went into advertising to make money, understandably, because I was broke, and went to therapy and did not pick that script up for 4 years. Did not touch it for 4 years because I was like, I need to take care of myself because this pulled something bad up.
Maybe stuff you didn't even know.
Oh my God. I had found notebooks from when we were in like middle school, and I thought someone had stolen my book and like was bullying me through. And I realized I wrote that shit. Like I wrote these horrible things about being a monster, about being disgusting, about it being my fault. And that's why, for me, I had to take the time to process that. And I had to take the time because if I didn't focus and do the deep work on learning to love myself, I had no right to tell anybody else how to do it, basically. And so during those 4 years, I also came out, which was a huge part of that, of like that shame and everything. And that need to control was this fear. And like looking at that, it was so important. And then my friend Lizzie Bryce, we were working on a series called Your Hair Looks Great Today, and we were location scouting. And I like mentioned the script. She's like, can I read it? I was like, no, no, it is. I was like, all I remembered was how I felt, was about how horrible I felt. And I was like, no. And I remember the stress and anxiety. And she's like, okay, send it to me. So I sent it to her. I had to dig it out of a folder I called Hall Closet on my computer, which I threw all the documents into because organization is hard for me. And I like lost the actual original document because it was so old. And my computer had crashed. And I sent it to her and she's like, are you ready for notes? I was like, no, I'm not. And we met anyway. And she loved it. And beyond loving it, talking to her about these characters reminded me how much I love them and how much I love this world of getting to see friends supporting the hell out of each other. And as you know, as a creator and as a coach, is so key as adults, especially for women, or I know as part of the queer community, right? Our chosen family is who we lean on, and our friends are who we lean on during the good times, and especially the bad times, especially the challenges when you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so that best friend that I co-wrote my first play with, we support each other. You know, we've been best friends since we were like 12. And looking at that, our friendship is built on this foundation of checking in and holding space. And that's something that we learned to be more honest with each other as we got older. Cause you know, you think, oh, I'm going to lose my friends. Everyone's going to hate me and I'm too much and da, da, da. And the best thing about friendship for me and what I try to model in this movie is what so many of us talk about that I wish I saw more on screen is just people loving each other and accepting each other and cheering each other on. Seeing a friend succeed does not mean you're failing.
Or that you can't also succeed at something. I loved where we grew up. I think we grew up with many, many privileges, but it was tough. You turn a corner and it's another rich, beautiful X, Y, and Z.
It's like a fishbowl. Yeah.
Yeah. Tough. And there's a lot of pressure on succeeding academically. There's a lot of pressure on then going to a prestigious school and making, you know, they're in a lot of ways blessed beyond belief. But I think it also made it really difficult, even within your own friend group, even for people that you were really close with, to be like, yo, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I'm not good right now.
Absolutely.
And you hide these things in shame. And I, you know, really struggled with eating issues and didn't tell a soul until I was like 30.
Right.
Because it's like, I don't want them to think I'm not perfect or I'm not okay or I can't
don't have
do
it
it
together or I was weak and I couldn't get things under control, which is the root of that, of disorders, right? It's being like, I just need to work harder because I'm failing. And if I work hard, I'll achieve blank, right?
Yeah.
It's ditto why like I legit, like I had a doctor who, especially when it came to the body side, I had a doctor who had been plus size as a kid and always struggled with her weight. And every year there's a scene in the movie about the main character being weighed, and it's really tough, but honest. It's like, it's a, you know, minute long scene. And it is what adults come and talk to me about. But she legit put me on the equivalent of speed to help me. And I essentially, I know. And this is why I speak very openly in our education curriculum about being aware of your provider. And if your provider makes kids feel unsafe or insecure, that's probably not a good provider for you. So like we talk about health at every size, training, right? And that's for everybody. It's not just for plus size
adults
people,
need it.
Right?
I think what I hope is like all of us need it right now because we never were taught that, right? Like as adults.
No, it's like a main skill we have to understand.
What I love is as you're developing programs like this, like I'm hoping that then they learn it as kids who then they don't need to learn it as an adult.
Right?
Like it's there, they have it down. And then that generationally starts to get passed down and ingrained because we weren't taught these things, nor were our parents, nor were, we were in this kind of pressure cooker society growing up, where also as someone who was and is conventionally, by society standards, would have been beneficial for me to see this movie in high school.
Right. I mean, looking at, and I think this is why I talk about it not just being for plus size people, but especially there's this great book. I actually brought books out that I love. So there's this great book called Fat Talk, which is fantastic.
I've heard of this. Yes.
It's fabulous. And she talks about the conventionally beautiful, thin people and that pressure they feel about not wanting to become fat or not wanting to, and especially as their bodies change as they grow, it's almost as debilitating in terms of confidence because you have this fear of unbecoming who you are, which is perfect, right? Ditto, someone who's thin, it does not mean they're healthy, right? And so if someone looks at a doctor who is just focused on weight, meaning healthy, which it isn't, right? They look
BMI
at
is the dumbest thing I've ever, the dumbest.
BMI was invented, I think it's Dutch. It was invented to measure Dutchmen. Are you a Dutch man, Sarah? I'm not a Dutch man.
I mean, I guess if I was if I wanted to act as one, I could, but
Sure.
no.
Most of our world is not made of Dutch men. And it was legit. BMI is wild. It legit was incorporated by American insurance companies as a
Yep.
way to measure populations and turn people down or take people on for insurance. Wild.
The whole insurance situation.
But looking at that and I'm hopeful because I watched the movie. I love like previewing it with friends and especially friends with kids. And so I watched it with my friend Evan and her son. And what was so cool, and he's 12 and he's just brilliant and wonderful. But I loved watching it he watched it like an inch away from the screen. He was like loving it. And at the end, Evan, who's an awesome mom and is like raising this like stellar feminist kid, but also holding space for him because he's a human being, was like, did you understand what the main character was going through? Do you understand what people at your school could be going through? Because he's always been a thinner kid. And he's like, I haven't experienced this, but now I understand why they'd feel like they want to be quiet or why they are insecure about themselves. And like, that's the core of art for me is empathy, right?
Mhm.
And that's the point and why I was really mindful in avoiding stereotypical or like triggering things. Like you barely see the main character eating in the movie. We don't see her like binge eating. We don't see her. We just see how she's moving through the world.
Yeah.
And that was really important for me because I wanted to show the humanity side and not something that people could screenshot and go, well, she could have just not eaten those snacks.
Yeah.
She
Or
could have just exercised.
like regurgitate the
Right.
things that people say
Right.
about whoever. And this can be for any group of people. And
Absolutely.
wait, whether that's gender identity, whether any of it, they can
Right.
say, well, here, look at this movie. Of course,
Look at this.
of course she's doing this.
Of course.
She's doing that.
Right. And that's what we tackle in this movie that I really love. And I'm really proud of the way our team brought it to life because it's done really respectfully, but without shying away from the tough conversations. Again,
Yeah.
I had options for people who wanted to buy the script and attach a big director to it. And I said no, because I was like, I want to make sure the script stays intact with the tough stuff, with the mother-daughter tough conversations, with the main character talking about self-loathing, where we see how she looks at herself in the mirror. Those smaller moments that, I've gotten pushback sometimes of being like, there's just so much talking. And I had to push back to go, I know. I'm like, I tested this. And this scene is a conversation we don't hear
But one that can be started.
But one that can be started.
Because of this minute long
right?
snippet.
And because these conversations are happening, it holds space for other people. And like, especially the reason I believe in testing stuff, especially for audiences that aren't seen a lot, is with the audience you're making it for, is I was able to go back on that note and go, this spot is exactly where 3 grown women burst into tears and told me about it during multiple screenings. This works. We cannot take it out. Right. And that's what's really important and why I love talking to writers and creators about writing what you want to see and then go to your audience. Even if it's on Zoom, test out your script, test out your idea with your audience before you bring it to a studio or a funder or whatever. Yeah. Because then you make sure it's hitting early. You make sure, and if it's not like Rachel, that person who wanted Rachel to die in a car accident, I was like, wow. I was like, thanks for your feedback. Because I'll never say, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, thanks for your feedback. I'm like, I have so much work to do. Right.
But it's good to know because when you're so in something sometimes too, I mean, this is like I felt hilarious, but I was looking at the word package so many times yesterday that it started to look wrong.
It looks like a different word.
So you're in it. So and you think, okay, I'm getting my point across. This is clear. I'm getting it across. And then 10 other people read it and they're like, this is pig Latin. Like, this isn't, what is this?
What does this mean?
Yeah.
And especially like getting outside feedback. And it's also a great thing to help us fight perfectionism because if I tried to make the perfect film you never would have been seeing it this fall. And
Yeah.
I
Or
gave
ever, maybe.
I gave myself permission because I knew how much pressure I put on myself, that I had kept the script away, that I had so many ideas, especially when you talk about making yourself small, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what that therapy was about, and why, when I first started writing about body image, it was about when we start making ourselves small in one way. Physically, we start making ourselves small in other ways. It was learning to take up space. But I legit was like, I am looking at this not as making my perfect film, which naturally my first movie had to be a teen ensemble comedy with a fashion component. I'm like, it couldn't be two people in a house, or better yet, a submarine, which would be like super cool to shoot because it's like the same lighting all day. Cool.
You're just like,
But
let's
no,
just be in here for 6 months.
exactly. I'm like, it's a family comedy in a submarine, right? And so like down under. And so wild. But I basically told myself, I was like, I am getting my MFA MBA.
Mm-hmm.
I want to learn. Learning is how I combat perfectionism. So like, I want to learn how to make a movie artistically, how to talk with my different department heads, how to shoot something creatively and make it work. And I want to learn the business side. I want to understand the legal components.
Mm.
I want to understand what goes into the budget. I want to understand the working pieces. And that's why I got to know every member of my team, right?
Yeah.
And why I talk about the 250 people plus
Wild.
who made it happen. And like, that's the thing when someone's like, your movie, I'm like, our movie. And I'm very comfortable with myself. And people are like, take the compliment, and I'm like, I'm very comfortable in what I've achieved. I'm very confident and proud of what I made, but I cannot take that compliment and take it alone, because the sheer amount of people who brought their talent with our cast and crew, of people who gave feedback on the script tours, of I vetted the scripts, and while we were editing it with psychologists, teachers, parents, kids, social workers. A social worker, speaking of eating disorders, a social worker is the reason why you never see what the mean girl in the film is eating, because she controls what her friends eat. It's like a part of her bullying. And she has her own big time struggles. And when I mentioned that as an artist, right, when you're like, okay, the mean girl controls what her friends eat, the natural instinct is to show that, right? Is to do like what's called an overhead shot. You'd show every plate on the table to be like, they're all the same, like something's wrong. And this is how this girl controls her friends. And I was talking with a social worker, a friend at a birthday party, because naturally I just talked about body image 5 years of my life. I was like, hey,
hi, happy birthday, Jimmy.
Let's talk about my body trauma. It was great. I had so many deep conversations with so many people. It was the best, and also exhausting, but the best. And Abby, the social worker, goes, whatever you do not show what she's eating. And I was like, what do you mean? And because I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, people struggling with an eating disorder will see this character who is stereotypically beautiful and is thin and whatever, and they will see that what she's eating and take a picture.
And that will be their...
that will be what they eat.
Mm-hmm.
That will be their new control, is to be like, I want to look like Sylvia. I'm going to eat whatever she's eating because clearly it's working. Right. And like that, the illness side, right, of that control. And so because of that, I basically escalated that information to every single department on my team. I talked about it with props. That's the reason why the food containers that they have are not see-through. They're not plates. They're like curved up. Why our camera team, we changed all the shots to be straight across the table. So you see the tops of their food and you see them sad eating it, but you don't see it. And ditto, all my departments, I let them know in what's called a page turn. You basically go through the whole movie with every department to make sure everything is covered. And I mentioned it to everybody. I was like, FYI for future projects, right? Because knowledge is power. And so looking at that, the mindfulness, but also going to experts. So I still do that for my projects. So like Gyno Kid, I have a TV show version of it. And it's based on the true story of my mom taking over the middle school health program before we got there.
Super.
She's the reason why we got Miss Orlando, who was our health teacher. Because before that, the health program was so bad. And my mom and my brother and sister, older, they were in it, and my mom came in to complain. She's like, this is not fair to our kids. They need to learn about their bodies. And it's still abstinence only, by the way. It's still abstinence only. which is wild. And she was like, our kids deserve to learn about their bodies, and then like left to pick me up from practice, and got a call that night being like, congrats, it's your program now. And my brother and sister were mortified.
Well, because you're whatever, you're 11 and they're like, period. You're like,
yeah, it's just awful. And so, but my mom crushed it and did so well. They hired a full-time person. And so it's based on the true story. But it's basically a small town family of gyno kids, whose mom takes over the curriculum. And it's so fun. But even then, on my first live reading I did, in addition to having my parents give feedback, they're basically my consultants. It's the best. I'm like, I need a patient whose crotch feels like it's on fire. What could she have? Like, it's so fun. It's so fun. But I had a family friend who is on the board of education. I had psychologists. I had nurses. I had different people to give input to make sure the work is not just good, but accurate.
Yeah.
And most importantly, it doesn't harm people watching. It only helps. And so that to me is the most important side of my work, and why I really believe in testing stuff out and bringing in experts. Ditto the education curriculum. We have 3 phenomenal healthcare providers from New York that we vetted, who specifically firmly believe in health at every size, but also in addition to like the personal stories, can share information, vetted information, and point people. We have a whole resource page at the back to be like, continue learning, continue talking.
Yeah.
And the whole point is to use the film as a common language for people who maybe aren't ready to talk about their own experiences yet. But it's a space for the adults in the relationship, whether it's adult and a kid. We talk about caregivers. It's not just for parents. It's for anyone who's in a caregiver role to talk with kids or teens in their life, but also for adults to talk to each other, right? Doing what we're doing and what we do with our friends and loved ones, of being like, let's talk about this because I kept this to myself for a very long time.
Yeah.
But having it be rooted in science and rooted in healthcare and rooted in, that knowledge is power, which is like at the core of, is what my parents taught me as healthcare providers, and what's the core of Gyno Kid. But ditto for Empire Waste, like combining comedy and health education is my happy place. It's the best. So I cannot wait for the world to see it.
I'm so it's coming out in theaters.
It's coming out in theaters. So we're going to be announcing it officially, I think, next month, but we're going to be coming out fall 2024, which is very exciting. And we're going to be coming out in theaters across the country. And we're also going to be coming out around the world, which is very cool. Thanks to our distributor, Blue Fox Entertainment. And folks can learn more at empirewastefilm.com. I have a newsletter. It's just me. So you can just sign up and get updates on like where we're streaming, all these different things. If you reply to it, it's just me. I've been running that for 5 years. It's just me. But we also are on Instagram at Empire Waste Film. And we're in like festival run now, which is so fun. And I was supposed to go to Seattle. We just screamed at Seattle this week, which is so exciting. But I just got a new niece. And so I wanted to stay local. Oh, she's the best. And delivered. Just get this. So my sister-in-law is doing amazingly. She is a rock star. Like the human body is it's incredible. But get this, my niece Margot was delivered in the same hospital my brother, sister, and I were all delivered, where my dad worked as an OBGYN and delivered babies. But she recovered, and with my sister-in-law in the same room, my mom recovered with me as a kid. What? Isn't that nuts? And the same nurse who worked with my dad when we were born is getting ready to retire. And she had Polaroids from when Peter was born, and my dad came by with him. He would bring him in on rounds and bring his son to get my mom a break. And then photos of my brother and sister coming on rounds because my mom was home taking care of me. And my dad, like we grew up like running around the hospital, but this nurse brought out these photos that my brother took, and it took with him. And it's now like part of like our family, it was just so special. And so I will like dedicate my whole life to reproductive health professionals and supporting the hell out of them because they do the work.
Because I wouldn't have a baby without them.
Right.
So
especially, oh my God, for Gyno Kid, we did talkbacks after we did like a full run.
Because you bring up like after all of the things,
God, we would do a talk back on different health topics, and we especially focused on reproductive health. And so we did, one of our most popular ones was about egg freezing. And so I brought in experts from Shady Grove, RMA, and then this awesome provider, OBGYN, who actually trained in fertility.
Mhm.
And it was fascinating because we had people there in their 20s through their 50s, like asking all these questions, talking about the changes, but most importantly, demystifying the process,
Yeah.
right? Demystifying and also being really honest about what your body goes through when you're freezing your eggs. Because people are like,
Insane things.
what's 2 weeks? Cool. And you're like, it's not just 2 weeks, right? Your body feels like it's like hyper stimulated, right? And then the
For a
weeks
while.
afterwards, right? Exactly. So like one of my best friends froze her eggs, and I actually sent her the playlist my lead, Mia Kaplan, created for those tough scenes. I asked them, I was like, what do you need after a tough scene to like feel more present, get back to yourself? And they were like, I love to dance. And I was like, make a playlist. And so I scared the crap out of Rainn Wilson while we were filming, because I jumped into the room playing Chaka Khan's I'm Every Woman and being like, wait, and so I sent that incredible playlist to my best friend when she had to do the jabs, like all the, injections. And I was like, she was by herself, and I was like, play it. And she goes, that got me through. And so I asked the doctors, because they were like, kind of going around, like, this is what happens, the medications you take. And I was like, how do they get that medication? Is it oral medication or is it needles? And like,
dab yourself in the butt.
It's needles. And I was like, what's your recommendation for handling that? Like, what's your recommendation for people who have a partner or people who are going solo? So like getting deeper into what to expect, because not only is knowledge power, but it helps you prepare, right? It helps you figure out like, oh, guess what? The day after my egg retrieval, I'm not going to bounce back into work. I still have a hyper-stimulated system that's totally freaking out. And, is
your ovaries were just stabbed a billion times.
Your ovaries were like, you just feel ill. Right. And so, and I haven't gone through it yet. And so for me, it was fascinating. And I was like, can I get a discount? I'm not joking. Right. It just, I'm like, and my friend's a comedian. She was in the front row. Like, comedian insurance is not great. Right. And so it was wild, but this is what I love talking about. And I love talking. We did a panel on endometriosis, and that was incredible. We had Dr. Najat there, who has been, leading endometriosis research for like 35 years and just hearing the changes. But the coolest part for me is having people in the audience who either were endo warriors, or people in the audience who had gone through IVF or had gone through menopause for a menopause panel, but especially people who wanted to learn.
Yeah.
For people there are some people in the audience for endo that were like, oh my God, I have to talk to my doctor because I have those symptoms.
And it's been normalized of like, women are tough. You're tough. You got it.
Right.
And you're like, I don't got it.
Periods hurt, right? Have some chocolate in a heating pad. And you're like, you should not pass out when you're...
Or vomit. Yeah.
You should not pass out. You should not lose time. You should not have to skip school or work due to pain. That's not normal. Right. And ditto, like, and just looking at that, and oftentimes it's not caught until people are trying to have kids.
Yeah. They never really figured out what was happening. They did find like a really bad dormant. In fact, it was a lot. I had this like crazy dormant infection that was finally found, and I was on all this stuff. I do have a lot of very funny videos of me coming out of anesthesia though. So.
There we go.
My husband so kindly took them. I'm like, do you think Tori will love me if I have a baby? He's like, you're good. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been just delightful.
Likewise.
Delightful, Claire. I will obviously link everything up in the show notes of where they can find you, where they can find Empire Waste, all of the things. I hope it comes to Arizona because I would love to go and see it.
Oh, we're so proud.
But thank you so much for just so generously giving your time. You're in the tent. You've been in the tent for a long time, but
I love this tent. It is a safe tent to be in, and it's very nicely lined. I felt great.
It's just it's like glamping. We glamp here. We're not campers.
Glam.
We're glampers.
I love running water.
I
just love running water.
I love showering.
And I love running water. I love
hot coffee.
Yeah.
And all that.
Love an outlet.
But you are incredible. I am so proud of you for all of the work that you are doing, have done, and all of this that you've just built. So everyone go check out Claire. She's the best.
You rule.
Thank you for tuning in to the Welcome to My Tent podcast. I hope you had as much fun listening as I do recording. I am so happy to have you here, and see you next episode.